Hi, my name's Mark Hart and I'm co-founder and director of MJ Solution Consulting. Welcome to our demonstration and discussion around the power of RPA. So we're going to do a session today titled Driving Efficiency and Insights using RPA to analyse tax cases. But actually we can analyse any sorts of documents really. It's just this is a real life use case involving the analysis of first tribunal tax cases. Let's talk about some of the benefits. So RPA has huge time savings. If we look at the analysis of documents, the average person reads at about 250 to 300 words per minute. I don't know about you, but I often have to read things more than once as I realise my mind has floated off somewhere, which means that if we're being generous, a typical document of about 15,000 words takes about an hour to review and summarize, and I think we're being really generous with that. Well, if you do that with RPA, you use that with ChatGPT, you'll see in the demonstration we get that down to about 3 minutes, which is a huge time saving. So what is the challenge here? Well, first tribunal cases, there's about 12,500 of them. So there's an awful lot of manual work, time-consuming work to analyse those documents. It's very, very resource intensive. Because there's so many documents, equally, you're either going to have to do this over a very long time or involve multiple people. So you have the issue of subjectivity, first of all, from the individual, but you also have inconsistency either because you take a different approach over time or because you're involving multiple people who will naturally do so. It's also rather boring, or in my opinion at least, which means that it's going to be error prone. And finally, something MJ Solution Consulting talk about a lot, it's going to take you away from those maybe higher value tasks that you could be completing to focus on this. So we're really freeing you up for higher value work. So let's move to the demo. We're going to take it in 3 parts. First of all, I'm just going to show you the inputs for the process and how that works. We've made that very flexible so that you haven't got to touch the RPA at a later date. Then we're going to take you through running the process. We're going to run it for about half an hour. I'm going to stop it at important points just to show you the way we've dealt with certain exceptions throughout the process. But most of it we're doing fast forward, as I'm sure no one wants to sit through 30 minutes of watching a robot work. And then finally, we're going to go back and look at the outputs and see the value that we've got from the process. So let's dive in, shall we? Okay, so let's first of all take a look at the inputs for the process. Using another robotic process automation or RPA workflow, we downloaded using data scraping all of the data related to the 12,500 cases, of which you can see the first 18 on screen. So things like date, case number, respondent, etc. And we're going to use those case numbers then to go back on to the website using again the same workflow to download all of the documents related to each case. The data scraping for information took about 20 minutes. The cases themselves took a couple of hours to download. Here's an example of one of those first tribunal cases. You can see they're about 22 pages long, lots and lots of words, so hitting that criteria we talked about earlier. Okay, so let's take a look at the Excel document. Let's look at the tab Submit the Query. This is where we've put the questions that we're going to ask ChatGPT. First of all, the questions as we submit that PDF document. So I need you to summarize the tax legal case, etc. Forewarning ChatGPT what we're going to be asking of it. And then we've got further questions as we submit the individual sections. So summarize section 1 with some details, summarize section 2, and you can't see all of the text there because it's hidden in the Excel cell. Why are we submitting in 6 different parts? There's a word limit within ChatGPT. So therefore we're getting the RPA to separate the PDF into 6 different sections and then submitting that to the ChatGPT piece by piece. Now if we move to the logic tab, you'll see this is where we're including the logic that we're going to submit to ChatGPT. So please summarize, give us some key factors, etc. Now, let's just take an opportunity to summarize what we've seen. You can see that we've really streamlined the way that we've gathered the data to input into this process, but we've simplified the way that you can go and edit and fine tune those questions rather than having to edit the RPA itself. You can just simply go into Excel and fine tune those questions without having to mess around with the workflow, which I think a lot of people will be far more comfortable in doing. All right, the exciting bit, let's run the process in fast forward. First of all, we're going to double click on the icon on the desktop. That's going to launch the robot. There are other options that involve triggers, but we've gone for what's called an attended robot, so one that starts with the user. And you can see it now submitting those questions with the PDF document attached in the 6 parts, and then it will move on to asking those questions. Now we are running at about 10 times normal speed. You can see that by the time down the bottom right, but I'm going to slow it down to normal speed now because as I was recording this half an hour, an error appeared. And this is just to prove that we can deal with all the sorts of errors that can appear. The RPA will notice that and it will click regenerate response, which is essentially a way of kicking it off again. And we can do that with all sorts of different errors. It's just a case of kind of almost triaging those errors and then programming the process to look for those errors and know how to deal with them at the time. Alright, so that's an overview of RPA. It's not particularly exciting, of course, because it's all in the background and it happens without intervention. But what have we achieved? Well, we've achieved reviewing 10 documents in a half an hour space of time. We've also done that seamlessly. So the process is run without any manual intervention at all, including dealing with errors. So we can do that 24/7 without manual intervention. So let's now have a look at reviewing the output of that. Okay, so you'll recognize this being the Excel document we started with, but now we're to the far right columns where you can see the process has automatically populated all of the information that's been output from ChatGPT. So you can see the full summary, those key deciding factors, keywords, keyword outcome, etc., all auto-populated in a very user-friendly format. Okay, so let's review that part. So we've produced a really easy to digest format of the outputs of this process. And most importantly for this particular project, we've simplified the way that we've produced that data so that we can easily pass it on to the next part of the process, analysing that data for keywords to see if we can make sense of the outcomes of those documents or cases, and also passing it into something like a Power BI. Okay, so what have we seen here? Well, first of all, we've seen how to remove an incredibly manual and repetitive task out of our daytime activities. We've improved the consistency of our document review. We've removed the error-prone risk from the process, and we've really allowed people to focus on more higher value tasks rather than what may be to some repetitive and boring work. But more importantly, I think we've achieved our goal far quicker than we would have done otherwise, which is really important in today's fast business environment. Let's very quickly talk about some numbers. So we've looked at 12,500 cases in this case, and actually the demonstration today dealt with 10 or 11 of them. That took roughly about half an hour. So actually to analyse all 12,500 cases, because RPA doesn't take lunch, doesn't take a break, doesn't get bored, will be achieved in 26 days. That is the equivalent of a staggering 7.5 years worth of a full-time equivalent employee. So absolutely staggering savings of doing this sort of task. So hopefully you found that demonstration really interesting. Of course, RPA can be applied to all sorts of different things, but this was just a great example of just a staggering amount of time that could be saved. If you want to find out more, or if you just want to talk through your use cases, you can see our contact details on the screen right now. Thank you very much and have a good one.